You, of course, know that Brexit did not happen immediately after the Brexit referendum in 2016. There were exhausting negotiations between the UK and the EU. First, about the exit of the UK, and then about the future relationship between the EU and the UK. After the official Brexit on January 31st in 2020, where the UK officially left the EU and with it the Parliament, there was a transitional period until December 31st in 2020 to implement the new relationship. And there are indeed some longer transitional periods for some areas, but this was the most important one. And people are talking a lot about the level of preparations for Brexit on the different sides, or more especially the lack of preparation. So in a few of my videos, well, 29, I will give you an overview about the extent of preparations by different countries involved, and of course the UK and the EU. And today I will tell you about the preparations in Malta. After the Brexit referendum in June 2016 and before the end of the transition period on December 31st in 2020, Malta, like other EU member states, engaged in a series of preparations to navigate the potential impacts of the United Kingdom's withdrawal from the European Union. These preparations were aimed at addressing various aspects, including trade, citizens' rights, customs procedures, and regulatory adjustments. Malta, being a small open economy heavily reliant on trade, recognized the potential economic repercussions of Brexit. The Maltese government worked on diversifying its trading partners and exploring new markets beyond the UK. It aimed to mitigate the potential negative effects on its export-oriented sectors, such as manufacturing and services. One of the key concerns for both Maltese citizens living in the UK and British citizens residing in Malta was the protection of their rights after Brexit. And Malta, along with other EU member states, negotiated with the UK to secure the rights of citizens and ensure they could continue to live, work, and access social benefits without major disruptions. Given that the UK's departure from the EU would likely lead to changes in customs and border procedures, which it did, Malta had to adapt its customs infrastructure. This included setting up systems for handling customs declarations and inspections to ensure the smooth flow of goods between Malta and the UK. And the Maltese government reviewed and adjusted regulations that had been previously aligned with EU laws already. As the UK was no longer part of the EU regulatory framework, Malta needed to modify its domestic laws to ensure that trade, product standards, and other areas remained in compliance with the new situation. Businesses in Malta, particularly those engaged in importing and exporting, needed to review and possibly restructure their supply chains to account for potential delays or changes in the movement of goods. And this involved evaluating alternative transportation routes and adapting to new customs procedures. And the Maltese government conducted public awareness campaigns to inform businesses, citizens, and relevant stakeholders about the potential impacts of Brexit and the steps they needed to take to prepare. This was important to ensure that people were well informed and able to adapt to the changing circumstances. Malta, as an EU member state, participated in negotiations with the UK regarding the future relationship between the two parties. This included discussions on trade agreements, security cooperation, and other bilateral matters that would influence their post-Brexit relationship. In the run-up to the end of the transition period, Malta, like other EU member states, faced a certain degree of uncertainty due to the evolving nature of the negotiations between the UK and the EU. The eventual agreement on the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the TCA, provided then a framework for their relationship moving forward, although there were still adjustments to be made and ongoing challenges to address. Before the end of the transition period on December 31st in 2020, Brexit preparations were considered highly important for all affected countries, both within the European Union and the United Kingdom. The transition period began after the UK officially left the EU on January 31st in 2020, and it allowed time for both parties to negotiate their future relationship and make necessary arrangements. And because some of them did more preparations and others less, that's the reasons why I'm doing this little series. And if you want to know something else right now, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.